are insisting to bring this issue forward? Are there any hidden agenda bring this energy transition issue, or it is just matter of a new cake, a new money that could be generated for the oligarch to get more money, and they could transform from brown to coal safely, and they could attract investor from the global market without any law enforcement in Indonesia. In this discussion, we have a very resourceful speakers. The first one is Mr. Laude Muhammad Syarif. He is the Executive Director of Kemitraan. He will speak about lesson learned from the corruption in the oil and gas sector, which we could also learn more about it from him. The second one is Ms. Mona Wasef. She is the Advocacy Manager from Publish What You Pay Indonesia. She will talk more about the challenges in the critical mineral governance, that we already know that aside from coal, Indonesia is also resource rich in bauxite commodity as well as nickel commodity. So we want to hear more about the governance of those two commodities from her. The third would be Ms. Tari. She is the Vice Coordinator from Indonesia Corruption Watch. She is quite an expert in the issue of open contracting, so probably we could learn more issue about transparency in public procurement in detail from her. And we also have Mr. Wawan Suyatmiko from T Indonesia, who is also pretty expert in the issue of beneficial ownership transparency and corporate transparency as well. That also has become the issue that has been bring forward by the C20. And there is also Mr. Nurkolis Hidayat from Lokataru Foundation that will bring forth the issue on anti-money laundering in this session. And we also have two speakers that joining us online that are Mr. Visnu Juwono. He is the lecturer from the Faculty of Administrative Science, University of Indonesia. He will bring the issue regarding anti-corruption policies recommendation in the renewable energy sector from the academia perspective. Last one will be Mr. Blair Glencorse as our international co-chair from the Accountability Lab. He will present us about his work in monitoring the anti-corruption commitment that has been made by the G20 countries so far. So the first one, I will give an opportunity for Mr. Laude Syarif to present first. 15 minutes, the floor is yours. Mr. Syarif, bisa ngomong bahasa Indonesia juga, Pak Syarif, kalau misalkan
okay. Ada itu nggak? Ada dipresentasiin nggak? Nggak, I will speak English. Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting Kemitraan for this very important meeting. The organizing committee asked me to talk about energy transition without corruption, lesson learned from oil and gas corruptions. So basically, I just want to, because I'm old enough, just like Dadang and Pak Budi, so we understand a little bit about corruption in the past. So, so my presentation will be consist of some milestone of corruptions. So sad. Some milestone of corruption in oil and gas in the past. So, for example, as a background contents, you name it, we have it. You name all natural resources, we have it. So we are very, very rich in gas, oil and gas, all minerals, you name it, gold, we have it, nickel, we have it, bauxite, rare earth, we have it. You name it, we have it. Coal, we have it. And you can actually see it. This is not my map, but this is the map from the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Unfortunately, we are rich but corrupt. So all the money from natural resources only enrich certain kind of people. Next. Can you push next, please? Yes. And oil and gas revenue. When I actually speak outside Indonesia, usually I like to give them this. We do have quite enough actually reserve, not yet operated. But Indonesia, it's very good example that oil is not sustainable. Because we came from exporter to importer. We withdraw our membership from OPEC in 2008. So oil and gas are not sustainable. So that's why we have to use it wisely. What I mean with wisely? It has to be managed properly, as not to destroy the environment, and the revenue from that particular very precious oil and gas that is to be for the people. Next. I just give you an example of useful comparison from Publish What You Pay and KPK report when I was in KPK. We have this. For example, not only oil and gas, but also for minerals, 90% of license holders do not properly report their mining activity. How much money they take, how much ore they take, how much money they produce, monthly, yearly, they never report. They report it, but mostly, yeah, it's not correct. A lot of manipulation. Even, can you imagine, 90% license holders do not pay their obligatory reclamations post-mining. So you can actually see all the hole in Kalimantan, in Sumatra, in my own kampung in Sulawesi, for example. It is open wide. And even, this is very important, the finding 1,150 licenses holders, they don't even have a tax file number. So meaning they do not pay tax, etc., etc. And this may not actually happen in oil and gas because they are more regulated, but still some kind of this practice also happening in oil and gas. Next. Yeah, this is a gentle reminder for Pertamina corruption. That's why I say sustainable corruption. We never actually learned from Ibnu Sutowo corruption in 1966 when I was born. I'm old enough, huh? And 1976, for 10 years. And he never go to jail. He never go to jail. And his wealth, yeah, you can actually see them until today. Yeah. And next, another one, as a gentle reminder of Jarawacik and Kepala SKK Migas. This is the work of Pak Budi from KPK. Unfortunately, corruption is
recording in progress
and keep on replicating itself with new actors and with new modus operandi. So Ibnu Sutowo may be different the way he do his business, but SKK Migas before, and I think maybe still until today. Next. And this is actually very interesting one, because there is a discussion between, is this a corporate action or corruption? For your information, this particular case also investigated by KPK at that time. But we do not brave enough to take it to the court, but Kejaksaan. So please see this. I think the top executive or the law enforcement agency must learn from this case. Former Pertamina boss Ibu Karen actually sentenced to 8 years in Pengadilan Negeri, but she was acquitted at Mahkamah Agung in the Supreme Court. Next. So the real impact of corruption is and mismanagement on oil and gas. I just give you, this is 2020, the largest oil and gas company state-owned Pertamina, booked more than 700 million of net loss. Can you imagine? They are a monopoly, but actually they keep on losing. I don't know why we keep losing. And next. Pertamina even brave enough, actually, to bribe the commissioner for KPK. This is unimaginable. Unimaginable. I mean, I've been trying not to show this, but I think this is the pinnacle of my presentation. I always already discuss it with Dadang, actually. But this is very sad. I mean, Pertamina, that we are trying to fix their management, they even brave enough to bribe the commission of the KPK. This is a sad story, and this must not happen again in this country. Next. So what is actually the modus operandi of oil and gas? This is nothing new. Enriching the board of directors and board of commissioners through sister companies and Pertamina and PT Gas Negara. They have a lot of them, and they use that to enrich the people. It is not to enrich the company. Bogus investment or irresponsible investments. For example, I still remember when I was in the KPK, we investigated this is particular case, the investment in, okay, I don't want to mention it, but I mean, they just buy it in actually loss. Manipulation of government subsidy for personal gain, and we do not, the second, conspiring with traders for illegal use government subsidies, manipulation of tax, royalty, and other non-tax revenue, bribe, gratifications, embezzlement, money laundering, and lastly, illegal donation to the ruling parties, political party, governments, and parliament members. So if you want to actually make state-owned company actually healthy, we have to stop all this. And next, my final, yes, I actually consulted this with the former Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, Pak Jonan, because I don't know how to address oil and gas corruption, where to start. But I think the top executive and board of commissioners must show leadership and anti-corruption commitment. And the second, we have to stop a conflict of interest. Can you imagine if the top executive in the government also involving in those companies, or their companies actually own this sector too? This is, and the second, we have reduced too much involvement of the government in corporate management. The fourth, the government have to be focused on supervisions and financial and performance audit of those. And of course, every state-owned, not only state-owned companies, but actually every company that actually own energy or natural resources, they have to have anti-bribery certification, like ISO, for example. And we have to give the professional with high integrity to run the companies. And lastly, close down loss-making sister company. And I think they already started. I think the minister wants to do that now. But I think it's too slow. We have to close it down. And we have to stop giving illegal donations to the government and to the parliament. And of course, we do not want to see this actually happening on the new investment on renewable energy. And I thank you so much. Lihatin gambar terakhir, cakep soalnya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laude. Wow, there are so many key takeaways because it's not only related to the issue of corruption, but also low level of compliance in paying tax. So probably it could also happen in the renewable energy sector. Another interesting thing is that he recommend to reduce too much involvement from the government. So it's pretty interesting because energy transition nowadays is mostly government driven. So probably it will provoke some of the government parties. Okay, I will give the second opportunity to Ms. Mona to talk about more about the critical mineral challenge in Indonesia. The floor is yours, Ms. Mona.
Thank you. But let me to stand up because I couldn't see the presentation well if I sit down. Okay. Sakit layar gini-gini. Which position? Here? Siapa? Masuk layar, masuk kamera. Bisa. Okay, where is the PPT? Please open the presentation. The ones with challenges in the critical mineral. That's right. Okay, before when we had a dinner with, actually not, we have a chit chat with Pak Budi. Where's Pak Budi? Oh, he's not here. He wasn't here. He said that G20 declined our proposal about renewable energy, right? And I was wondering why China declined our proposal because Pak Budi didn't tell the exact reason why they declined, but I was wondering because China is one of the top producer of critical mineral, which is really important to support renewable energy. So, in my opinion, it should be China should agree with our proposal because the country is the one of the biggest producer of critical minerals. So, I'm kind of wondering what is the real reason they decline our proposal actually on the renewable energy. So, is it okay? My presentation? Because I couldn't remember very well if I didn't see my presentation. Yes. Right. So my topic is challenges in the critical mineral governance, and I will not talk about in detail, so maybe just a bit point on it. And before we jump to the challenges, the first question is why is this important for G20 countries? So there are several reasons. First is 20 countries is the 20 biggest markets in the world. And 20 countries also major producer of critical minerals, but also major importers of critical minerals and energy. So in the map we can see that United States, Australia, and Indonesia is the biggest producer, and a lot of G20 countries is top 10 of the critical minerals in China and Brazil and also Russia. And because and we can see that from the map, a lot of critical mineral is concentrated in only several G20 countries, like chromite, cobalt, and copper. Most of them is site or can produce in G20 countries. So it's important for G20 countries to look more on the critical mineral governance so that it can give the peoples or the governance could be more better, and in order to the governance of critical mineral doesn't have to be the governance of like another minerals, because we know that and Indonesia especially, we have a really bad experience or high corruption case in the mineral sector. So we should learn from the past, like Pak Laude said before, how we prevent the corruption case in minerals such as batu bara or gold or another not critical mineral source, so that it couldn't happen again in this critical mineral that really important to our renewable energy. And so, next slide please. And not only most of the G20 countries produce that critical mineral, the critical mineral is also important for the next 2 decades, because in the PPT we can see that our world want to achieve net zero goals of the, what is it, like climate change, fight to climate change, or how to fight the climate change. We should change our fossil fuel energy to renewable energy, that the source of the renewable energy is from the critical energy. So in the next 2 decades, we need 6 times higher of the critical mineral compared that current situation. Like such lithium, we need 42 times higher compared to this current situation. So that's why we should put more attention how to govern this critical mineral, so that it can give us, Indonesia or another country, better economies or help for the people. So next slide please. Next slide please. And what is the challenges? Actually, there are several challenges in how to govern this critical mineral, but I'll focus on 2 variables, such as governance and corruption. This governance is more on to how to manage the revenue that we get from the critical mineral, because we know that in this current situation, minerals is related with fluctuation. It depends on the market price, it depends on the demands. So supply-demand relationship is really important indicator that will, that will give the fluctuation to the critical minerals. So as you can see that the dynamics of the price, the dynamics of the supply and demand, because we know that from the Pak Udi said, there are political talk how to respond to this renewable energy, because so it still have a long way, or and a lot of G20 countries have a different opinion, a reason how to adopt this renewable energy or critical minerals governance. So, and we know that one of the proposal from a lot of countries, that how we can recycle of this critical mineral energy, such as battery, what is it in English? Battery, because if we can find the technologies to recycle the battery and another source of critical minerals, it will, if the countries didn't have a good plan how to govern their revenue for the critical minerals, and suddenly we find a new way to recycling that critical minerals, so it gives the not the situation for the country that produce the critical minerals. So they should have a plan, a longer plan, how to manage the revenue or the sudden revenue from the critical mineral. And another is, and we also know that some of the critical minerals is from countries that really have, the worst in CPI? CPI, such as Congo, Republic Democratic of Congo, and of course China, and like or Russia, and yeah, most of the G20 countries have a score of CPI below 50, I believe. And that's from the governance challenges, how to manage the revenue from the fluctuation and from the politics in responding this critical mineral. And the second is corruption. And as we know that the critical mineral needs a lot of investment, such as I said that we need 1 trillion investment on to produce, to exploitation the critical minerals, so that such as aluminum, cobalt, copper, and lithium and nickel, we can produce more for the need of the renewable energy. So yeah, when a lot of investment in that sector, so yeah, as we know that the companies, the businessmen that have a relation with the political official politic, then they will reach their hand on that money. Yeah. And on the corruption side too, let me read it first. Yeah, I think we can continue to the next slide. So how many critical minerals are located in countries with high levels of the corruption? So such as cobalt, 70% of cobalt is produced in countries with high level of corruptions. And like I said before, Congo and rare earths is in China. But US is also producing rare earths actually. And so yeah, if we didn't manage or find a way to govern this well, so we don't want, like Pak Laude said before, oil and gas corruption happen again in Indonesia. And next slide is, how does the critical mineral impacts corruption risk? Yeah. And like even though one thing that differentiate critical minerals with it's not usual mineral, but ordinary minerals like gold is we need it fast right now, and because a lot of countries in the world push the using of the renewable energy. So sudden increase in demands from critical energy will make maybe some countries didn't apply the due diligence or make a licensing process is easier, and like we saw in COVID-19 response, like ICW said that a lot of corruption case happen in supplying of like vaccine or anything that related to COVID-19, because we need to respond it fast. So we didn't want to happen again in this critical mineral. So and with the large amount of economic rent from the critical mineral, so there are several risks such as state capture or role of PEPs, political exposed person, and conflict of interest. That still happen in Indonesia. And also fast tracking on special licensing will open the door for potential abuse, conflict of interest, bribery from foreign companies, and for the public participation will be minimum. And as we know that a lot of contract in Indonesia or maybe in several countries didn't allow public to discuss it well in the planning step. So the public doesn't really have an opportunity to discuss it before the licensing or the companies operate in their area. So the next is, now so what can we do? I only give one recommendation here, but we can discuss it further in the Q&A session. So the role of transparency, we should disclosure of information such as licensing, contract transparency, and corporate political engagement in critical mineral policy making, so that it can prevent conflict of interest and regulation capture. And as we know that even though the critical mineral has the same value chain and life cycle with another mineral such as gold. So we can prevent it, the corruption. We can prevent the corruption by looking at the value chains of the minerals. And yeah, the disclosure of ultimate beneficiaries is also important, so that the companies couldn't use the anonymous companies to, so that to prevent the tax or anything bad that they want to do in Indonesia. Sorry. And yeah, we can use a corruption impact assessment to prevent the corruption. And the most important thing is we should do like a multi-stakeholder dialogue from the civil society and the governments and the companies. And because we can see from the ITI that because of these MSGs, we can produce some solutions so that the peoples and the governments and the companies can get the, good impact of the collaboration. So it is important for civil society to monitor the critical mineral governance too. And yeah, the most and the last but not least is the environmental disclosure, because you can see that a lot of mining in the countries that produce critical mineral is also like artisanal mining, so it's kind of informal mining. So because so it's important for us to how to manage this informal mining, because it can impact the environment. Yeah, like the companies did. So, and the last is, transparency related to state participation can help to ensure the state-owned company operation are aligned with the public interest. So maybe that's all for me. I give the floor back to Didi.
Thank you, Ms. Mona, for the excellent presentation. We got much information from her, because she stated that mostly G20 countries are the major producer of critical minerals, as well as the importer of critical mineral, and also the demand for the critical minerals would rise by as much as 6 times. So the sudden increase of demand would lead to higher risk of corruption, because maybe there will be more solicitation of bribery to the public officials, or it could also lead to conflict of interest. And also, she also stated that the role of transparency would be higher in the energy transition period. She emphasized it a lot. And also, EITI would be beneficial to reduce risks and also capitalize opportunities. Thank you, Mbak Mona, for the presentation. And for the next presentation, I would give to Ms. Tari. She would tell us more about open contracting, and she is pretty well versed in the issue of transparency in public procurement.
Thank you, Mas Didi. Hello, everyone. So I don't have any presentation, but I think I will start with how can we guess a number about procurement and also about the energy transition. What's the connection between these two issues? Because usually when we talk about energy transition, then we will talk about what Pak Lode or Mbak Mona's things. But honestly, when we talk about energy transition, we also talk about procurement in the energy transition, and it's a lot of money there. So besides before we talk about the energy transition, then I'll let you know about maybe a fact about the procurement and the open contracting. So can you guess that government around the world spend 30% of their gross domestic product for public procurement? So it's a lot of money. It's around 13 trillion USD around the world. So that's a big money. And in Indonesia, if we see in 2021, if we see the data from public national, the national public procurement, we have around like 52% for our GDP for public procurement. So that's a lot of money, but the sad thing is when we have a lot of money, then there is a lot of corruption there. Like Laude said, when we reach, then we have also a lot of corrupt things in there. So it's the same with the procurement. So if we see the OECD data, at least 57% of corruption related to bribe in public procurement. You can imagine, it's like, you know, like every public procurement, the business, the individuals need to bribe the public services, the officials to get the contract, and it's not just in OECD country. If we see like in the other data that the World Bank, for example, like the business and the individuals, they need to pay 1 trillion every year to get the contract. So that's a lot of data. And in Indonesia, you know, like 70% corruption cases, it's related to the procurement. Yeah. So when we talk about procurement, there is also and always be a potential for fraud and also corruption. And what's the connection with the energy transition? If I will capture a bit, especially for Indonesia. So Indonesia, we have a roadmap for energy transition in Indonesia. And if I'm not mistaken, we have five points within this roadmap. The first one is about the retirement of power plant gradually. So, you know, like maybe the other country also plan for that. And then the second one is about accelerate the development of new renewable energy, like we try to use in Indonesia or other countries. And the third one is the more efficient use of energy. The fourth one, they encourage the use of electric vehicle and stove. And the fifth, implement the smart grid, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to highlight the number 4. So the government currently encourage all of the government bodies, the government officials, to use the electric vehicle. Can you imagine the supplier for this, you know, the electric vehicle? If we see the policy that the government just published, if I'm not mistaken, the last month, so there is potential of conflict of interest in this policy, because there are some high-level officials that also have business in this electric vehicle things. So that's why when we talk about the energy transition, we need also to talk about how we push the government to be more open in terms of their contract in procurement. Because there is a lot of money there in energy transition, and also there is a lot of fund from the other country that, you know, come to Indonesia to push for the energy transition, and this is need to be monitored. The government should open their contract, especially for the procurement, not just the contract, I mean, you know, the paper with the sign, but the process from the beginning, from the when they, you know, plan to have the procurement until they monitor their monitor, and then they see is it finished or not, or how's the result of the procurement. So yeah, I think that's the big connection between these two issues. And yeah, I hope Indonesia could be an example, a good example for this in the next year. I hope, because, you know, Indonesia have a pretty better system, and then I think we can boost this system to be more open, to be more transparent, related to the procurement, especially for the energy transition. Yeah, I think that's just for me. Thank you. I'm over to Didi.
Thanks, Tari, for your presentation. It is really interesting that she also already noted that there are several key energy transition project that has been going on in Indonesia or would be planned in Indonesia, such as the early retirement of coal-powered power plant. The second one is electric vehicle. The third is smart grid development. The fourth one would be the renewable infrastructure. Yeah, it is very interesting because maybe you also already know that several days ago there was an article from the TechX which stated what we call it, some high-level minister are probably involved and also would take advantage in the development of electric vehicle in Indonesia, and it is really it's really surprising actually. And she also stated that the Indonesia itself already has a good e-procurement system and we could optimize it, but she also stated that the planning document of the energy transition project should also be open, not only the tender and bidding process, but also the planning process on why the certain project is really need to be done. Thanks, Tari, for your explanation. And the next one would be Mas Wawan Suyatmiko from TIA Indonesia. He would tell us about the urgency about corporate integrity and beneficial ownership transparency in the energy transition phase. The floor is yours, Mas Wawan.
Check. Yeah. Thank you, Didi, for your bridging words. That I think I would like to continue. Tari, it is interesting when we show or read the article that has been released that the former of chief of procurement agency, his resignation because of conflict of interest between the electric vehicle procurement. So I think this is why we need to raising awareness and also mainstreaming about the urgency of the beneficial ownership and in the time of the energy transition period. So next please. Yeah. How does the energy transition impact corruption? So I think there are three main opportunities that can TI Indonesia share to you all about the energy transition impact corruption risk. I think the first one is about the opportunity for the industry to make money. You know, the energy transition, it is surprisingly but not shocking, yeah, when conflict of interest, when the beneficial owners of the corporation still have a relationship with the politically exposed person. So I think the opportunity for the industry to make money with the large amount of economic rent that could be extracted from the energy transition. The renewable energy also face the same corruption risk that plague the fossil energy industry. So I think, quote-unquote, the corruptors is only moving from the fossil energy to the renewable energy or energy transition phase. The state capture, like Mona said before, the role of politically exposed person and conflict of interest in the energy chains, it is also happen in this energy transition period. The second one is about the opportunity for government to raise investment and raise the revenue. I think this is become important because we are members of a G20 that we always say that more than 80% of economic circulation only happen in G20. So when we also have the what is changing to our policy related to the beneficial ownership, related to the economic growth, we can also influence the other non-G20 members. So the opportunity for government to raise investment and raise revenue, it is become a fast-tracking or special licensing process for the renewable energy projects. The local procurement, like Tari said before, and a greater involvement of state-owned enterprise open the door for potential abuse, conflict of interest, bribery by foreign companies, for example, in Congo, like Mona said before, not only about the corruption, also the modern slavery on those country related to the renewable energy. And favoring of the politically exposed person while reducing the opportunity for public participation and the public scrutiny on those policy. And I think the third one is increase the demand and limited supply. As we know, previously low in demand and limited in supply, the sudden increase in demand for minerals, especially critical minerals, increase corruption risk in company engagement with the communities about the land acquisition, interference by foreign government in the licensing process in producer countries, as well as bribery. So I think the modus or the problem of corruption within the energy transition phase or energy transition period is like the traditional corruption, for example, the bribery, graft, kickback. I think this is also a problem that happened on the procurement, also happen in the licensing and in investment. Next slide, please. So I refers to the Greenpeace Indonesia report that has been launched by August 2022, that the corruption risk in the energy transition period also can be occurred in three phase. The first one is in a phase out fossil fuel. It is also have an opportunity to corruption and also the risk. And the second one is in the exploration and exploitation of critical minerals, like Mona with the great explanation before. And I think that third one is in the renewables infrastructure itself. For example, like infrastructure procurement of renewable energy infrastructure process that I said before, the former of chief of procurement agency resignation because he didn't want to abuse the conflict of interest. He didn't want to abuse the regulation that has been released by his institution. The corporate transparency and integrity to safeguard the energy transition, it is also become the more important things that issued by G20 member. For example, the private sector integrity has been the key thematic issues of the ACWG on the G20. The G20 have a lot of principle, a lot of guidelines how to raising the private sector integrity. So the private sector transparency has a bigger impact on foreign direct investment. The developing countries, as compared to transparency in the public sectors, highly relevant with the energy transition agenda, which needs to attract the investment. Transparency International Indonesia, we also have been launched several research related to the energy transition phase. For example, on the transparency in corporate reporting, said that 51 out of 95 power companies do not have anti-corruption policies. It is around 22%. Still, in a transparency in corporate reporting, only few power companies, 17 out of 95, which regulate political donation. As we know, the political donation that release or sending to from the corporate to the politician, it is also become a conflict of interest. And the third one, Transparency International Indonesia also has been released the report about the Corporate Political Engagement Index. There are very sadly zero coal power plant companies regulated revolving door policy. So there is no one of the coal power plant companies have the revolving door policy. The revolving door policy, as well as the calling of a period, it is the entering point when we want to regulate and preventing the conflict of interest itself. And then 40 out of 90 coal power plant companies have directors and commissioners categorized as politically exposed person. It is also linear with the Indonesian Ombudsman findings last year that said about 110, if I'm not mistaken, of the commissioner and directors, also they have double job as a Directorate General in respective ministerial level. And then the bribery, which involved the state of enterprise, also happened at the top level management. The beneficial ownership transparency, therefore, to safeguard the energy transition, it is very essential and important piece of information to expose the corruption. The high-level principle on beneficial ownership transparency that was been created by G20 in 2014. I think this is become important now when each countries have to making the guidelines and how to implement, and public scrutiny can be raised to monitor the beneficial ownership data and information. 81 jurisdictions have policies regarding to the beneficial ownership transparency. So I think this is become our modalities when we talking about the beneficial ownership. Listen alert from Indonesia. Indonesia has opened its beneficial ownership register publicly in July 2022, but I think still have many homework. For example, the verification will be in the next major of tasks. I think the standardization of the data that should be uploaded by a company, it is also become another homework. And the poor compliance of companies in reporting their beneficial ownership data. Around 28% companies that has been uploaded their beneficial owner data to the beneficial ownership platform that has been released by Ministry of Law and Human Rights. And there is no information within there is no information whether beneficial ownership data used to detect the conflict of interest. So I think we also, in Indonesia, I mean, we also have a lot of data that has not been integrated is each other. For example, when the Ministry of Law and Human Rights, they have beneficial ownership registry data, and then the Financial Intelligence Unit, they also have the politically exposed person data. How we can imagine that the data is integrated is each other? So I think it has become interesting when we integrated the two data. The first one talking about the beneficial ownership, and the second one talking about the politically exposed person, that they have a very strong relationship each other. Next one, please. Yeah. So from our lot of discussion in within the civil society, we try to address to the G20 about the recommendation related to the beneficial ownership disclosure. The first one is, I think this is the right time to criminalize the private-to-private bribery. Yeah, despite we know in Indonesia we didn't have a positive regulation that regulate how to the private-to-private corruption, but under the ANKEK we can use to promoting this initiative. And then I think the Supreme Court, they have also corporate criminal liability regulation that also can be used to criminalize the corruption between private to private. And the second one, I think the regulate to preventing the conflict of interest, including the revolving doors and also cooling off period policies. It is become important when we talking about the beneficial ownership transparency. The third one, we should encourage the corporation to adopt the high quality corporate integrity mechanism. As we know, for example, the United Kingdom, they have regulation that mandated to the companies to put their beneficial owners data to the government, and then government very open with the public participation, so the public can monitor how the data valid or not. And fourth, introducing the additional beneficial ownership transparency requirements for the third parties of state-owned enterprise. Yes, as far as I know, the state-owned enterprise, they have mandated by Ministry of State-owned Enterprise to implement the ISO on anti-bribery management system. That one point in ISO anti-bribery management system also the companies, the state-owned enterprise should stated about their conflict of interest. And the fifth, implement the measurement to verify data about who is the become of beneficial owners. And at last but not least, enforcement of beneficial ownership registration. So I think this is the most important thing. So as we know also that Indonesia, one and only country members of G20 that has been not yet as a member in FATF. So I think this is also become our compliance, how to push, how to encourage the government and also the corporation to comply with the beneficial ownership transparency principle and initiative. Thank you. This is from me. I go back to Didi. Thank you, Didi. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mas Wawan, for the excellent presentation. Huh? Yeah. So key takeaway from his presentation was that the energy transition phase is another opportunity for the industry to make money, and he afraid that similar actor in the fossil fuel industry would only shift to the renewable energy industry. So similar actor will produce similar behavior probably, similar bad behavior, I mean, probably. And also he also try to advocate the integration between beneficial ownership data and politically exposed person data that has been owned by the PPATK, Indonesia Financial Intelligence Unit. Whether it could be integrated or not, it will be challenging, but it will be interesting in order to eradicate corruption. And also, he also emphasized the importance of revolving door policy. It is really important because Many public sector official, after they retired, they became a commissioner for certain companies because they have a connection with their junior in their previous ministry. So probably they could give an undue influence to them. So it will be dangerous. It will be another thing which related to conflict of interest. And the next one would be from Mr. Mas Nurkolis Hidayat. He would tell us deeply more about money laundering. The floor is yours, Mas Nurkolis, 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Didi. Good evening, everyone. I have a little puzzle first for all of you about the connection between money laundering and energy transitions. My question to you, just guess where the money come from to our energy transition. Guess, quickly.
We don't know.
Just guess. Where the money come from to our energy transition sector in Indonesia. Okay? Coal company. Who else? Domestic companies. Well, China. Okay, China could be, maybe China is the largest. From Tesla. So let's double check. I would like to learn from our colleagues from KPK. So follow the money. So I would like to start to investigate the connection between money laundering and energy transitions. So I think this is the tricky question, or maybe we are not really familiar. What the connections, what the relationship between money laundering and the energy transitions. But let's start with the number of money that Pak Laude already presented before, $2 billion. And just flows from mining sector, coal, from tax evasions, illicit financial flows. So, let's start from that. And the second one, we can continue to investigate with the two major minerals in our energy transitions. What is? Nickel, and second one? Still coal. Coal. Because coal generate electricity. Electricity used is sold by the company to our electricity SOEs and then to the customer. So, about $2 billion. My investigations with my colleagues here from Publish What You Pay Indonesia about the illicit financial flows and tax evasions in mining industry, especially coals. We investigate 5 largest group of coal companies, and we found that 100 million at least, 100, more than 500. I guess it's closer to $1 billion. Indonesia suffer from profit shifting and with the method of, especially from tax avoidance and tax evasions, mostly from tax avoidance. So, if we follow the money, and we can go to we move to the larger pictures of Indonesian foreign direct investment. Which country dominate our foreign direct investments?
Singapore.
Singapore. What else? China. Again, China. What else?
BVI.
Hong Kong, Netherlands. Is that a similarities from the countries you mentioned? Majority is tax haven countries. Yes. So our money actually flows to the tax haven countries. So the oligarchs' money come to Netherlands using shell companies, enjoy zero and exemption from tax, and then return to Indonesia. That's what we call in our taxation as a rerouting investment. So our investment actually not really genuine, real investment from the rich countries, but actually, as your guest before, that's our money flow to the tax haven and then return as a direct investment. Indonesia, unlike the Brazil or Brazil, their foreign direct investment, they qualify, they categorize which is the real investment and where the round-tripping investment. Indonesia, there's no report about it. But the fact actually is still there that the majority and the larger majority, and you can even further investigate to the province level or to the sectors. So, again, from FDI to energy transition. So, I think if we tracking the money, and we will find that not all the money came from the genuine investment in Indonesia. The money, is it legal or illegal? Maybe mix, but let's start with the more deeply with the mechanisms in this wealth defense of the oligarch. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, our fight against corruption is sabotaged by somebody else. Who are? Lawyer, accountant, financial advisor, and other financial intermediaries. They call as a gatekeepers, as a professional enablers. Since the beginning, our discussion tonight, I haven't heard about this. So, but actually, this is the key in our fight against corruptions, because they really sabotage, and the picture actually reflects this. How many lawyers, how many accountants, tax advisors imprisoned in Indonesia or prosecuted by KPK? Less than 10? From 100 or of my thousands corruptors convicted by the KPK. What the meaning is? It reflects our ignorance, or maybe we not really put more attention seriously to the role of gatekeeper in administering this kind of financial crime. So, as I told you, they sabotage our reform. They undermine. They exploiting our legal systems, legal substance, and unfortunately, until now, we don't have strong or robust regulations to oversight them, to monitor them, to deter them, to stop them in administering or masterminding the corruptions. So that's why in my presentation tonight, I would like to highlight, and I would like to ask our colleagues from KPK and others in this movement to start pay attention to this issue. So, because when we talk about beneficial owners transparency, about others, political exposed persons and others, so these gatekeepers actually is central in helping them to maintain their wealth defense strategy. So I think that's fortunately in the current Indonesia G20 presidency, the issue of professional enabler is one of the priority issue. But I think we have to more concrete in this way, like not only in collecting campediums, but also come back to the domestic countries of the to the member of the G20 to investigate and to regulate them. So there's two ways in the approach of countries to address this gatekeeper. The first, to govern them, to regulate them, and the second one, to leave the associations of legal profession to make self-regulations. And of course, because this corruption is cross-natural, the character of this is cross-border, so we need international cooperation for this. Okay. That's maybe from my presentations. We will discuss later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mas Nurkolis. Yeah, we are also puzzled whether there is any relation between money laundering and energy transition, but he has been give us a good answer because as we already know that he gave us information about where the majority of FDI comes from. Most of them came from countries that has been predicated as tax haven countries, and it would raise the issue whether the money is legal or illegal. So it's really interesting to discuss about that. And also he also emphasized the importance in regulating the gatekeepers or the professional enablers, because they are the one who facilitate the money laundering or financial crime, and also because there is no mechanism to oversight the lawyer in recruiting the lawyer in recruiting their client. So he promote the lawyer association to create a self-regulation for the sake of them. Thanks, Mas Nurkolis, for your excellent presentation. And next one will be come from Mr. Visnu Juwono from the Faculty of Administrative Science of University Indonesia. The floor is yours, Mr. Visnu. Are you with us?
Okay, Mas Didi. Sorry, just join.
Hello. Okay.
Hello, do you hear me?
Sorry, due to the limited time, the presentation will be only limited to 12 minutes, Mr. Visnu. I'm sorry for the time limitation.
No problem. Thank you so much, Mas Didi. First of all, thank you so much for the committee. Adadang, the chair of the Working Group, Pak Laude, my friend who's been knowing for quite some time, and also my colleague Mas Adrianto and others who in Bali. I hope join Bali. But thank you so much for this opportunity. So my focus will be on the policy recommendation for anti-corruption renewable energy sector. So obviously my colleague would be an activist in Indonesia have talking about a lot about energy and they're experts and they have experience, so they have really to explain about that. But what I'm trying to present here is more on the global renewable energy sector. Okay, next slide. So I'm starting with the mapping of potential renewable energy and then identifying the potential corruption in energy sector. We also come up with several study cases of corruption cases, and also there's a best practice in terms of global energy efficiency and renewable energy fund, and also most importantly on this presentation is the recommendations towards regulation transparency, and public participation. Next slide. Yeah, of course, in terms of corruption perception index, there's a lot of criticism, yeah, especially in developing countries, yeah, because not only Indonesia, but I think there's a backlash toward democratization, yeah, and of course that backlash also linked directly in the increase of corruption, yeah. So Indonesia, although it's come uh, rise, but it's not significant rise. So we still like under 50s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, and it's under 50s, and we've been doing this democratization since 1998. So it's been quite some time, and it's not still a breakthrough here in terms of corruption perception index. But not only Indonesia, but also other developing countries also and experience either a backslides or a stagnation. Next slides. Next slides. Okay. If we want to know the renewable energy technology that is come from renewable technology is the combination of hydropower, solar, wind, geothermal, wave, tidal, and modern biofuels. So in 2019, it's around 11% of global primary energy from renewable technology. So still, there's a lot of room to grow here because it's only 11% of the global primary energy. So most of the primary energy is coming still from the fossil oil industry. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, in terms of electricity generation, as you can see, the composition here, the renewable energy is still not significant, yeah, as you can see in the green side here. So most of it is still traditional electricity. Next slide. In terms of installed capacity, it's also happened the same, yeah. As you can see, the solar thermal and solar photovoltaic that has increased quite significantly. Yeah? But the renewable municipal waste is also not increased significantly in terms of installed capacity. Next slide. So if you see in terms of financial commitment into renewable energy, yeah, it seems that East Asia Pacific, if we talk about our region, is quite significant, yeah. While the OECD Americas is also almost the same, but there is not quite significant annual financial commitments is in, as you can see here, OECD, Oceania, Latin America, and Caribbean, they don't have quite a commitment in terms of financial commitment in renewable energy. So I think there's a hope in terms of Asia Pacific region. Slide. Next slides. So of course, Indonesia, we highlight Indonesia is among the fast-growing countries in terms of energy consumption. Indonesia also the largest country energy user in Asia, which accounting of nearly 40% of the energy used among Asian members. So this is, in terms of oil and gas industry, is a very good opportunity. And some of my colleagues in the previous presentation have described any potential corruption in that sector. Next slide. So the evidence in corruption in renewable energy is rent seeking, yeah, applies to renewable energy project the same as the extractive sector. So although renewable energy in terms of its sustainability, energy, and in terms of pushing for clean energy, but in terms of business, it's also better for rent seeking behavior. So there's previous studies that corruption in hydropower, for instance, accounts for 5 to 6 billion loss of revenue each year. Yeah, and Plummer identifies that this scenario corruption equals 10% of budget of all infrastructure. Yeah, at worst 30% is disappeared. Next slide. So this is number of corruption cases in terms of in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Kenya, yeah, in terms of dam builders, yeah, and then in Argentina, Paraguay, there's a bribes of misappropriation of funds. In Malaysia, Sarawak Energy has been accused of granting $200 million worth of hydropower contracts to company linked directly to chief minister's family. So this is not exclusively Indonesia, this also happened in other countries. Next slide. Okay, next slide. There's a couple of region cases in renewable energy, corruption cases in renewable energy sectors. Next slide. So in Mexico, identify that promoting a collusion among large corporations with concerns, yeah, of fraud, corruption, and identity among wind energy firms. So in terms of providing wind energy, there's in Mexico, there's also a potential antitrust practices, yeah, fraud, corruption, and antitrust practices. Next slide. In hydropower as well, there's also happening cases in Malaysia. Next slide. I don't want to go in detail because my time is limited. Next slide. In Kenya, also happened as well, yeah, in terms of off-grid solar, yeah. So although this is a very good initiative in trying to promote renewable energy, but in terms of its business practice, there's still a lot of potential corruption and collusion, especially as you can see in several emerging countries. Slide, next slide. But not emerging countries, but also advanced countries, yeah, in Italy, that also happened in the case of wind farm. Yeah. I don't want to go in details, but you can read it in my slides later because my time is limited. Next slide. Okay, I think Australia energy policy is also show there's also a potential corruption, yeah, in terms of trying to promote the clean energy in Australia, as identified by study by Lucas in 2021. Next slide. Next slide. I think because my time is limited. So there's forms of corruption based on several study cases that we identify. There's a form of corruption in the renewable energy, yeah. Public spending for renewable energies programs and subsidies, then the rigging, yeah. And then there's a bribery, inefficiency in mismanagement, and then electricity theft by tampering by bypassing meters, inflating costs of developing renewable energies, and then inefficient allocation of public contracts for renewable energies to those willing to drive rather than those able best to deliver the required services. Next slide. Yeah, this is a best practice introduced by Global Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Fund, which emphasizes on regulation, transparency, and public participation. Next slides. Next slides. Okay, so there's a policy recommendations in terms of regulation by banning or blacklisting companies or institutions that proven to have violated the rules, and then harmonization of regulation and support anti-corruption policies, especially related to conflict interest in renewable energy, and then require project organizers to conduct feasibility studies on renewable projects, and then also involving audit institution, yeah, with example in Indonesia, such as Indonesia Audit Board, State Development Audit Agency, yeah, in a specific audit in renewable energy projects from upstream to downstream, yeah, which is funded not only by foreign donors, but also, of course, by state fund. Next slide. In terms of transparency, my previous colleague mentioned about beneficial owner, which is the transparency of beneficial ownership, reporting of company political activities, creating transparency platform for renewable energy projects that can be accessed by public, applying the rules of transparency in renewable energy project in order to share responsibility in the project. Next slide. And then, of course, it has to be extensive public participation, yeah, by providing access information to the public about renewable energy, public participation from upstreams to downstreams related to renewable energy projects, implement rules on public participation in renewable energy projects, yeah, in order to form shared responsibility projects. Next slide. So I think that will be the end of my presentation. Sorry if I taking so much time, but thank you again for the opportunity, and it will be an honor for me to be able to contribute in this discussion. Thank you so much.
Our
I think the voice is beautiful.
with its off-grid solar, Italy and its wind farm, and also Austria energy policies, which is also heavily influenced by powerful corporate interests. So they couldn't take an independent energy policy, although their CPI score is probably above 50 or above 70, but it doesn't guarantee them to become a countries that could resist policy capture. And also he recommends several things which related to regulation on transparency and also public participation. That's also been missing in our discussion. Thanks, Mr. Vishnu. As the time is pretty tight, it is 10 before 9. Is Blair already joined the Zoom meeting?
Yeah, I'm there.
Hi Blair, thanks for joining us. Sorry, as the time is pretty tight, probably we could only give you 10 minutes to present accountability lab monitoring tools regarding G20 anti-corruption commitment. The time is yours, Blair.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. It's really a privilege to be here, and thanks for all of the really, really interesting presentations so far. I know it's been a lot of information, so I will be really quick. If we could go to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit less about the content of the C20 this year in the Anti-Corruption Working Group, and perhaps a little bit more about the process and the accountability of that process. In particular, the learning tool that we, through the C20 together, have developed, and that Accountability Lab and RUSI have been pushing along. If we could go to the next slide. I think there are still some challenges with the G20 anti-corruption working group process. I would love to hear your thoughts on this based on your experience this year, but I think there's still an information gap. The resources on commitments or information on what the G20 is doing is often general or not specific and not always up to date. I think there's been a proliferation of commitments. As you may know, in 2010 there were 3 commitments that were specific and measurable related to anti-corruption within the G20. Now there are more than 120, and they have often become broader and more vague over time. There are diverse sources used to track progress, so it's been difficult to compare progress against different commitments across countries. And within the G20, as you know, there is also an emphasis on self-reporting, so getting validated external data can sometimes be difficult and can take a long time. It's also difficult to compare different countries within the G20 that are at different points of implementation, and if they are beginning to move backwards and regress on anti-corruption issues, that's also particularly difficult to track in a timely way that can inform decision-making. And then overall, I think the indices that we use within the anti-corruption space tend to point fingers, and with the G20, I think we've come to the conclusion, and again, I would welcome any thoughts on this, that the way to push things forward is to encourage progress and to share lessons and to celebrate what is working. If we could go to the next slide. So we reframed what was a tracker of G20 anti-corruption commitment implementation into more of a learning tool this year with the support of the C20. We have focused on identifying existing policy-making processes and legislative structures, public bodies, offices, authorities, and organizations that have a key role in controlling corruption, and also the good practices and initiatives within G20 member countries to encourage them, as I said, and to try and disseminate ideas around those best practices. And the idea is to create a learning environment to support G20 to improve and to drive progress towards implementation of commitments. If we could move to the next slide. So what we did, and I'm sorry you might not be able to see these particularly well, is created one-page infographics for each of the G20 countries. I can send the link in the chat to those of you online listening as well, that outlined key progress and lessons around the 4 key areas of anti-corruption priority for the G20 this year. We intend to do the same next year and delve a little deeper as well into how else we can communicate some of these lessons and how we can begin to build networks around some of these particular topics. If we could move to the next slide. This year, we also aligned with an initiative by the government of Australia that you, I'm sure, are aware of, which was an effort to share learning across the G20, use existing tracking documents to respond to common challenges, which of course is in line with what we were trying to do, to enhance the sharing of information and resources about what successful implementation looks like. So we've been having a lot of bilateral meetings with G20 member points of contact on these issues, and then promoting G20 documents and successes and processes around anti-corruption more widely. And as we've heard from some of the other speakers, there's a lot of intersections of course, with other important anti-corruption efforts that are ongoing globally. And I think it's critical that we connect the dots now between what's happening here within the C20 and the G20 and other efforts like UNCAC, for example, like the Summit for Democracy that the US government is leading at the moment, like Open Government Partnership and other initiatives. If we could move to the final slide. So our plan going forwards, if you agree and would be interested in supporting us, would be to continue to build out these one pages, continue to advocate around these issues within the G20 countries and beyond. We want to crowd in more and more civil society organizations that have expertise on these issues. We want to work closely, of course, with the Indian presidency around the emerging anti-corruption priorities that we see from them, and really drive progress towards implementation of commitments. I think we have seen, as I mentioned, enough commitments. Now we really want to understand how countries are implementing those and drive progress towards them in a way that is measurable and tangible and time bound. And as I said, match those to other commitments being made elsewhere to ensure that we, across the next year, push together for the kinds of outcomes we want to see on anti-corruption. Thank you very much. I'll leave it there, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
The anti-corruption commitment learning tool. We learn a lot from you, as there are many information gaps in tracking the anti-corruption, the G20 anti-corruption commitment, which is widely dispersed. And also there's also a praise from him actually that the C20 Indonesia and G20 Indonesia could have a closer engagement. It is proven by the presence of Mr. Budi Santoso here. We could collaborate with the G20 representative, and also the need for G20 anti-corruption commitment to align the priorities with the another international effort such as G7 and also OGP. The time now is for the Q&A session. Whether there is any question from from Miss Meliana, and also is there any question besides from Miss Meli? You could.
Association like that, but I want to know how effective if we regulate them. But we already know that even the public body, like the law body, even anti-corruption body, cannot keep their integrity. And I really, yeah, I'm sorry, like think that is it right that we can only regulate them through the regulation? And the second one, I want to try to know about another countries. Maybe you already know about, there is the best practices of another country that already regulate their provisional enablers, and is there any positive impact to their country? Thank you.
Is there any question from the chat box? Uh, could you help me to open the chat box? Oh no, it's just to fill the online participant form. Is there any question? Okay then, so there is only one question from Mbak Meli regarding.
Can answer your question, Pak Laude, and others speaker also can answer. But if we see our regulations, when our talk is quite inadequate because there's only one specific regulations. This is PP, Peraturan Pemerintah, Government Regulation number 61. That's the revision to the previous one. That's the obligation to report for suspicious transactions of financial. So this is only and what the implementation of that regulations. Actually, very poor performance because very few lawyers report to the PPATK in Indonesia. That's actually the result from the last assessment from FATF to Indonesia. This year, I think the last 2 months ago, sorry. And in taxations, actually, we have some regulations. But again, that's inadequate. For example, the Ministry Finance Regulations 111, I guess, this related to the supervision to tax consultants. This only to tax consultants, not to tax other intermediaries, as I mentioned earlier. So the scope actually is very narrow, and it's not covered the whole the actors qualified as the gatekeepers. That's the problem within the inadequate. So from our discussions, the major challenge is also came from the reluctance, response from the bar association or from the lawyers community, because the obligation to report actually contradict with the duty of lawyer to keep the responsibility of client confidentiality. But the problem in Indonesia, they only refuse, not try to find the solutions. In other FATF countries, actually bar association try to more specific to regulate their code of conduct, to find the striking balance between the purpose of anti-money laundering regimes and code of conduct as a lawyer. So they keep their lawyer integrity with that kind of solutions. Indonesia, that's a big homework for the lawyer association to find the formulations, and of course they can find their own solution for this. But for governments, as I said, we need to at least what you said, leveling up from the government regulation to become laws. Maybe to revise anti-money laundering law, or as in the US now, there's a bill for professional enabler proposed by 1 to 3 senators in the US. But still there are discussions about it. And of course, in Indonesia, we can also promote that kind of law, because the regulations like IBA, International Bar Associations, also suggest that to striking balance between these two contradicts values, so should be regulation by legislations, not by government regulation. Legislation, laws. That's my response, I guess. Maybe other, you maybe can add. Other countries, best practices, Malaysia, they also have actually.
Yeah, just want to add a few perspective on it. Don't be too sad. Sometimes, we have to be realistic in see things, because this is not only Indonesia. So if you actually follow Paradise Paper, Panama Papers, and many other very developed countries, those people actually working on on similar things, So yeah, for example, registration of beneficial ownership in Indonesia. We just started when I was in KPK. I still remember that we can even actually manage to have ministerial regulations to make KIT mandatory for every companies operating in natural resources to register their beneficial owners. You know, that's not many countries. Indonesia, there we have it, and UK, and many others just cita-cita. They still, I mean, we have to be proud of what we actually get, you know. But there are other things that we have to be. I think we can make it, but we do not have enough willingness actually to do it. For example, this is simple, you know, to make one bar association in Indonesia. Yeah, because people now, for example, you violate your code of conduct in particular bar association, you can jump to another association. I mean, that's not happen in civilized country. Yeah, it is just like a political party. Yeah, they can jump from A to B and B to C, you know, because they do not have ideology. Yeah. For example, the opposition, for example, at the moment just said PKS and Partai Demokrat. But they're on a coalition in several Bupati election and government and governors. So they do not have ideology at all. Their ideology is just, you know, to get the powers and to become a leader of kabupaten, provinsi, and things like that. You know, so meaning, I'm feeling old. I think it is your time to fight for it. Terima kasih.
Yeah, I think it is also interest. Pak Laude said jump from the one lawyers association to another, and then when all lawyers is rejected them, he founded a new one association. Yes. So I think this has become problematic in our bar association regulation. But if the question about effective, I think the experience that came from U.S. American Bar Association that they regulated one of code of conduct. Yes, as we know in Indonesia, more than 40 bar association that only have one code of conduct, but the implementation is still a lack of transparency, lack of accountability, how they report their compliance to the code of conduct of lawyer itself. So I think if the question addressed to the effectiveness, I believe it is effective, rather than not regulated them. For example, in US, under the open government partnership, they have open lobbying regulation that all the lobbyists should put their profile, bios, and data to one platform. So the lobbyists is very, very obligated to open their access, open their information, who is become a lobbyist and who else that become your partners or clients. And the second one, I think Mas Nurkolis said about the importance of the declaration of know your clients in lawyers or bar association. It is becoming important. So in a previous presentation that Mas Kolis said before, when we're talking about the beneficial owners and then politically exposed person, lawyer as a gatekeepers, not only lawyer, all the legal profession, for example, the notary as a legal profession, it is have the main issue as a bridging, so as a gate. So I think when they mandated to declare about the KYC, know your clients, it is also become an entry point to our to our prevention on the anti-money laundering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Nurkolis, Pak Laude, and Mas Wawan for your excellent answer regarding the regulation of legal professionals in Indonesia and also its challenge. I think we agree that most of us are already tired, sleepy. We don't get a favorable time to hold this public discussion. So probably I would leave it to Nia as an MC to close our public discussion tonight.
Well, all right. Thank you very much, Ferdinand, for moderating and also facilitating the discussion today. It was very insightful and also so many things to digest, of course. And also, I would like to say thank you for our colleagues from G20, Mr. Budi Santoso, and also for our speakers today, Mr. Laude Sharif, Ms. Mona Wasef, Ms. Siti Julian Tari Rahman, Mr. Nur Khalis Hidayat, Mr. Wawain Suyatmiko, Dr. Wisnu Juwana, and also Mr. Blade Glencourse. Thank you very much for your time and also for your insight. And also I would like to say thank you for our friends, colleagues, and participants who is joining online and also offline. Thank you very much for your time. And also we do apologize if for any convenience happened during the session today. I'm Azania Nur Hidayah Siswadi, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. See you another event.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.